Hello my friend and welcome to Historian Sleepy Channel. Tonight we step onto a wind-scoured shore in the Viking world, where the grass lies flat beneath cold rain and the sea growls beyond a line of dark rocks. You pull your cloak tighter, though the wool is already damp, and stare across a settlement that seems to be sinking into the earth. The houses are low, green and strangely rounded, as though the hills have grown doors. It looks peaceful from a distance. Up close, the wind is trying to remove your face. You probably won't survive this climate for long with your modern heating habits, especially if your usual response to a chilly room is searching for a thermostat and complaining dramatically. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, share your location and local time in the comments. It is always comforting to know where in the world people are listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk toward the nearest dwelling with your boots sinking slightly into wet ground. The path is not paved. It is a mixture of trampled grass, mud, scattered stones, and whatever the local sheep have recently contributed to the landscape. Nobody apologizes for this. Viking settlements do not have customer service departments. The house ahead of you barely rises above shoulder height along its outer walls. Its roof slopes gently upward, thick with grass that shivers in the wind. At first glance, you might mistake it for a natural mound. Only the dark wooden doorway reveals that human beings live inside. This is not the famous Viking world of carved ships, polished helmets, and heroic warriors staring proudly toward the horizon. This is the ordinary Viking world, where people spend far more time repairing roofs than raiding monasteries. The heroic songs rarely mention roof maintenance because even talented poets have limits. You stand near the entrance and feel the wind pressing against your back. There are few tall trees around you. In some parts of the North Atlantic, especially Iceland and the islands settled by Norse communities, timber is scarce. The first settlers may find patches of woodland, but building homes, boats, fences, tools, and fuel supplies quickly reduces what is available. Driftwood becomes valuable. Imported timber becomes expensive. A straight, strong beam can be treated with the respect normally reserved for a wealthy uncle. The land, however, offers grass and soil in enormous quantities. You look down and realize the building material is everywhere beneath your feet. Turf is not simply loose dirt with a decorative layer of grass. It is a dense slice of living ground, held together by roots. When cut carefully, it forms a tough block that can be lifted, carried, shaped, and stacked. The grassroots weave through the soil like natural thread, creating a material that is surprisingly stable. The people around you know this landscape with an intimacy that modern life rarely requires. They understand which ground produces strong turf, which areas are too wet, and which plants create the thickest root systems. They do not consult a building supply catalogue. They walk over the land, press a heel into the soil, examine the grass, and make judgments based on years of experience. You watch two workers cut into a grassy bank with long iron tools. The work is slow and physical. Each strip must be separated from the earth without falling apart. A poor cut produces a weak block. A good cut lifts cleanly, with a firm underside and a tangled mat of roots. The strips are heavy with moisture. You try carrying one and immediately discover that natural building materials have not been designed with your lower back in mind. The workers seem unimpressed by your struggle. They arrange the turf near the house, sorting the pieces by thickness and shape. Some are long and narrow, others are cut into blocks. Different regions develop different methods, and techniques change over centuries. The exact structure of a turf wall may vary, but the basic principle remains wonderfully practical. Thick layers of earth and roots slow the movement of heat. A mainstream fact of Viking settlement life is that Norse communities across Iceland, Greenland, The Faroe Islands and parts of Scandinavia commonly used turf in construction, particularly where good timber was difficult to obtain. These houses are not desperate piles of mud. They are carefully planned responses to climate, geography, and limited resources. You circle the building and place your hand against the outer wall. It feels cold and damp, yet solid. The wall is much thicker than the wooden walls of many later houses. In places it may reach several feet across. That thickness matters because heat moves slowly through packed earth and trapped air. The wind can scream across the settlement, but it cannot easily pass through this wall. That is the first secret of the natural furnace. The house does not create miraculous heat from nothing. It protects every small source of warmth that already exists. A cooking fire, an oil lamp, a sleeping body, a crowded room, and perhaps livestock nearby all release heat. The turf prevents that warmth from vanishing immediately into the night. You glance back toward the open landscape. There is almost nothing to stop the wind. No high stone buildings, no forests forming a shelter, no cheerful row of suburban fences. The air travels across the sea and strikes the settlement with full force. A tall house would catch that wind like a sail. A low house allows much of it to pass overhead. The walls often curve or lean slightly, creating strength against weather. The roof is heavy, pressing downward. From a modern viewpoint, placing several tons of damp earth above your bed may seem like an unusual path toward relaxation. Yet the weight helps stabilize the structure, provided the timber frame beneath it remains sound. You notice that the doorway is small. You must bend as you enter, which may be practical for conserving heat, though it also ensures that every guest begins the visit in a humble position. Historians still argue whether some architectural choices were driven mainly by thermal efficiency, shortages of timber, inherited building traditions, or a mixture of all three. The likely answer is that practical people rarely rely on only one reason. A design survives because it solves several problems at once. The small entrance reduces the amount of warm air escaping. The low walls resist wind. The turf provides insulation. The structure blends into the terrain, gaining protection from the surrounding ground. Every element works quietly with the others. You pause outside because the person entering ahead of you is carrying a basket and has become stuck in the narrow passage. There is no polite way around this. You simply wait while a chicken watches the entire event with judgmental interest. The entrance passage is often one of the coldest parts of the dwelling. It forms a buffer between the weather and the warmer interior. Instead of opening a large door directly into the main room, you pass through a tighter space that limits sudden heat loss. It is the same basic idea as an entryway in a modern cold climate home, although your modern entryway probably contains shoes, umbrellas, and one mysterious bag nobody has opened for 6 months. Here, the passage smells of damp wool, smoke, earth, and stored tools. The darkness surprises you. Outside, the cloudy sky still provides a grey wash of daylight. Inside, the light narrows quickly. Small openings help preserve warmth, so the house cannot depend on large windows. Glass is rare and expensive in much of the Viking world. An opening may be covered with a thin animal membrane or fitted with a wooden shutter. But every opening creates another path for cold air. Your eyes slowly adjust. The interior is broader than the outside suggests. The walls seem to swallow sound. The wind becomes a low murmur instead of a constant assault. You hear the crackle of a fire somewhere deeper within, the scrape of wood, and the soft movement of people carrying out daily work. The temperature is not warm by modern standards. Nobody is walking around in a thin shirt while setting the room to a pleasant 22 degrees. Yet compared with the outdoors, the difference feels dramatic. The air is still. The walls no longer steal warmth from your body so quickly. Your fingers begin to loosen. That sensation is important. Comfort does not always require high temperature. Protection from moving air can transform how cold feels. Wind removes the thin layer of warmth surrounding your skin. Stop the wind, and your body immediately has a better chance of keeping itself warm. The house is therefore less like a blazing oven and more like a carefully sealed cloak. You examine the wall from inside. It is not a neat surface of polished boards. Some sections are lined with wood, fabric, or woven material. Others reveal the uneven character of turf construction. Moisture can be a constant problem. Earth walls may slowly shift. Roots die, rot, and compress. Insects find opportunities. Small plants may even attempt to grow where nobody invited them. One quirky tidbit is that turf houses can develop their own tiny ecosystems. Beetles, spiders, mice, and plant roots may share the structure with its human residents. A roof can bloom with grass and wildflowers, making the home look charming from outside, while something with too many legs explores the bedding inside. You're not merely living close to nature. Nature has moved in and refuses to pay rent. Yet the living roof has real advantages. Grass and soil absorb rain, soften the force of hail, and add another layer between indoor warmth and outdoor cold. Snow settling over the roof may provide additional insulation, trapping air within its layers. Of course, too much snow adds weight, and too much rain adds moisture. The household must constantly balance protection against decay. A turf house is never completely finished. It breathes, settles, leaks, dries, and changes with the seasons. Outside, the rain grows heavier. You hear it tapping softly against the turf above, but the sound is muted. On a wooden roof, the storm might rattle sharply. Here, the earth absorbs much of the noise. The room becomes quieter as the weather worsens. You begin to understand why the structure feels almost underground. Thick walls surround you. A heavy roof rests overhead. Light enters reluctantly. The outside world seems distant, even though it is only a few steps away. A woman near the doorway shakes water from her cloak and joins several others beside the fire. Nobody wastes time discussing the weather. The weather has been bad for several hundred years and is unlikely to respond to feedback. You move farther inside, allowing the passage to close behind you. The last cold draft fades. Smoke hangs lightly in the dim air, carrying the smell of burning wood, dried dung, and cooked food. The warmth is uneven, stronger near the hearth and weaker near the walls, but it remains trapped within the low structure. Your shoulders relax. The wind continues across the grass outside, searching for cracks, gaps, and careless openings. The turf walls accept its pressure without complaint, layer by layer, root by root. The house holds its ground. You sit near the wall and feel the deep stillness surrounding you. This humble mound is not primitive in the careless sense. It is a measured answer to a difficult place. Every block of turf represents labour, observation, and adaptation. Every low beam and narrow doorway protects something precious. Not treasure, not weapons, not glory. Heat! And as darkness gathers over the settlement, you begin to see that warmth here is not produced by a single clever device. It is gathered from small sources, guarded by thick earth, and shared among everyone breathing within these walls. You rise from the smoky warmth and step toward a newly opened side of the dwelling, where part of the wall is still under construction. The rain has softened to a fine mist, and several workers move across the slope with tools over their shoulders. Their task looks simple from a distance. Cut grass, carry grass, stack grass. It is the sort of job that appears easy until you touch the first block and discover that the ground has apparently been eating stones for breakfast. You follow them to a patch of dense turf selected for its tightly woven roots. The surface is springy beneath your boots. Years of grass growth have formed a thick mat, and the roots bind the upper soil into a tough layer. This living fabric is what turns ordinary earth into a usable building material. A worker pushes a long-bladed tool into the ground, slicing a straight line through the sod. Another cut runs parallel to it. Crosswise cuts divide the strip into manageable lengths. The blade must pass beneath the main root layer, deep enough to keep the block intact but not so deep that every piece becomes impossible to lift. You try the tool yourself. The first cut curves badly. The second stops against a buried stone. The third removes a shape resembling a disappointed turnip. Nobody laughs loudly, which somehow feels worse. Skilled turf cutting requires a practiced eye. The builder watches the colour of the soil, the thickness of the roots, and the amount of moisture in the ground. Turf that is too thin may crumble. Turf that is too wet may slump. Turf taken from sandy ground can lack strength, while turf from a dense meadow may hold together almost like coarse fabric. The best cutting ground is valuable, and it does not recover instantly. Once a layer is removed, the exposed soil needs time to grow another strong covering. A settlement must therefore choose its turf carefully. Building a large house can strip a surprising area of land. A mainstream historical fact is that Norse builders used several recognizable turf cutting and wall building methods, with techniques varying by region and period. Archaeologists find walls made from stacked blocks, long strips, alternating layers, and patterned arrangements designed to improve stability. These are not accidental heaps. They are systems learned through generations of trial, failure, repair, and quiet criticism from relatives. The freshly cut blocks are loaded onto a wooden sledge. In winter, snow can make transport easier, but today the runners drag across wet grass. A horse pulls the load toward the building site while two people keep the stack balanced. One block slips off. You bend to pick it up and discover that wet turf has the social charm of a sleeping walrus. By the time you carry it to the wall, your sleeves are muddy, your boots are heavier, and a fine collection of grass roots clings to your hair. Viking construction has given you a natural crown, though not the sort that earns a throne. At the building site, the foundation begins with stones. The lowest part of a turf wall must resist moisture from the ground, and stone provides a firmer base. Builders select broad, stable pieces and place them in a line, sometimes using smaller stones to fill irregular gaps. You crouch beside the foundation and notice that it is wider than the wall appears from inside. A strong turf structure often begins with a broad base, then narrows slightly as it rises. This shape helps the wall support its own weight. The inward slope also reduces the chance of collapse as the turf settles. The builders lay the first row of blocks with the grassy sides arranged according to local custom. Some blocks are placed grass to grass, others soil to soil. Alternating the orientation can help the layers lock together. Long turf strips may run along the wall, binding shorter blocks and reducing weak vertical seams. It resembles masonry, except the bricks are alive, damp, and occasionally contain an irritated worm. You set a block onto the foundation, it lands unevenly. A builder lifts it, trims one corner with a knife, and replaces it. The fit improves immediately. Every block must sit firmly against its neighbours. Large gaps invite moving air and water. Uneven layers create pressure points. If one side settles faster than the other, the whole wall may bulge. The builders compress each layer as they work. They press down with hands, feet, and wooden tools, encouraging the pieces to knit together. Loose soil fills small hollows, grass roots cross the seams. As the weight increases, the wall becomes denser. Trapped within the turf are countless tiny pockets of air. These spaces matter because still air slows the transfer of heat. Dense earth provides mass, while root fibers and small air gaps reduce how quickly warmth passes through the wall. The result is not perfect insulation by modern standards, but it is remarkably effective when combined with thickness. You place your palm against a fresh block and feel its cool moisture. It seems impossible that such material could help create warmth. Yet the wall works by slowing change. Outdoor cold must travel through layer after layer before reaching the interior. Indoor warmth must make the same difficult journey in reverse. The thicker the wall, the longer that journey becomes. A wall may be built with 2 turf faces and a core filled with loose soil, stones, or additional turf. The outer face meets the weather. The inner face shapes the room. Between them lies a packed middle that adds bulk and weight. This double wall method also allows builders to use their finest blocks where strength and appearance matter most. Less regular material can fill the centre. It is an efficient use of resources, much like hiding your untidy possessions in a cupboard 5 minutes before guests arrive. You watch as the workers stagger the joints. No vertical seam continues for too many courses. Each new block overlaps the one beneath it, spreading pressure across the wall. The technique resembles bricklaying, though the dimensions are far less regular. A builder steps back every few layers and studies the line. There are no metal measuring tapes. A cord may guide the wall, and simple wooden tools help check height and angle. Much depends on experience. The builder notices a bulge long before you do. He removes 3 blocks and rebuilds the section. You had assumed old construction methods were relaxed and forgiving. They are not. Gravity has always been strict. As the wall rises, its texture changes. Fresh cuts reveal dark soil. Green grass hangs from some edges. Pale roots form tangled patterns. Rain beads on the exposed surfaces and sink slowly inward. The outer face may receive special attention. Builders can angle the turf to shed water, trim projecting pieces, and patch weak areas with new strips. A neat wall is not merely attractive. Smooth, well-fitted surfaces give storms fewer places to attack. Water is the patient enemy. It enters cracks, softens loose soil, and adds weight. Freezing weather can expand trapped moisture. Repeated wetting and drying gradually distorts the structure. Drainage around the house therefore matters. Shallow channels may guide water away. The ground can be shaped so rain does not pool against the foundation. Stones near the base reduce direct contact with saturated soil. Historians still argue whether the most elaborate turf patterns developed mainly to increase structural strength, improve insulation, conserve high-quality sod, or display the skill of the builder. Practical motives almost certainly overlap. A wall can be strong, warm, economical, and visually satisfying at the same time. You notice one section arranged in a herringbone-like pattern. The angled pieces interlock, creating a striking surface of dark soil and pale roots. It looks almost decorative. This is one of the quirkier details of turf construction. Some surviving and excavated walls reveal careful patterns that are hidden once the building is complete, or covered by later repairs. The builder may spend hours creating work that few visitors will ever admire. Human beings, it seems, have always enjoyed making the invisible part unnecessarily beautiful. The workers continue upward until the wall reaches the required height. It remains low compared with a modern room, but its mass is impressive. You could lean against it without making the entire house tremble. You could also lose a small child behind its thickness, though this is not listed among its official benefits. The newest layers will settle over time. Their own weight compresses the lower courses. Roots decay slowly, soil shifts, and moisture moves through the wall. A well-built structure adapts to these changes without failing. In some cases, living grass continues growing on exposed turf. New roots may spread across seams and strengthen the surface. The wall becomes more unified as plants bind it together. This is not growth in the sense of a tree trunk becoming thicker, but it can make the outer skin more resistant to erosion. The house is partly constructed and partly cultivated. You return to the interior side and see another method of protection. Timberboards line selected areas, keeping clothing and bedding away from damp earth. Woven mats may hang against the wall. These coverings soften the room, reduce falling crumbs of soil, and create another thin layer of trapped air. The space between lining and turf can help, but it can also shelter insects and mice. A quiet scratching sound emerges near the floor. Nobody reacts. The household has clearly accepted that not every resident needs an invitation. The new wall changes the room immediately. The open side no longer admits the mist. Voices sound softer. The fire burns without sudden gusts bending its flame. You feel the difference near your ankles first. Cold air no longer sweeps across the floor. The room is not suddenly hot, but its warmth stops leaking away so quickly. That distinction is the heart of the design. The turf does not roar like a furnace. It does not glow or spark. It simply refuses to let heat escape easily. Every breath, every lamp, every pot over the fire adds a little warmth, and the walls hold onto it with slow, earthen patience. Outside, workers begin covering the raw surface with additional sod. The green faces turn outward, helping the wall blend into the slope. In time, weather will soften the sharp edges. Grass will spread across the joints. From a distance, the structure will appear less built than grown. You walk along the completed section and press your shoulder against it. The wall feels immovable, yet it is made from thousands of fragile roots and handfuls of soil. Its strength comes from repetition, careful overlap, and weight distributed across a broad base. No single block is remarkable. Together they resist wind, rain, frost, and long winter darkness. The builders gather their tools. Mud covers their hands. Their backs ache. Another row will need attention tomorrow, and another patch of turf must be cut. The work is slow because the wall is not merely a boundary. It is the thick protective shell that allows life to continue inside. You brush a strand of grass from your sleeve and watch the mist settle over the new green surface. The house seems to settle with it, low and steady, holding a pocket of human warmth inside the cold land. You duck beneath a dark beam and enter the central frame of the house, where the true skeleton of the structure stands hidden beneath earth, grass, and smoke. The turf may form the thick protective shell, but timber carries the weight that presses down from above. Without this wooden framework, the roof becomes less of a shelter and more of a very slow landslide. The main posts rise from stone footing set into the floor. Their surfaces are rough, marked by axes rather than polished smooth. Some trunks remain slightly twisted, because a perfectly straight tree is too valuable to waste merely for the pleasure of symmetry. Every usable curve is considered. Every branch fork offers a possible joint. The builder does not force the wood into a modern idea of neatness. The design follows the shape the tree already provides. You run your hand across one post and feel shallow cuts left by the blade. The timber smells faintly of resin beneath the heavier odours of smoke and damp wool. It is older than the house in one sense, grown over decades, and more precious than nearly every other material around you. Stone can be gathered, turf can be cut, a strong roof beam cannot be hurried. In settlements where woodland is limited, suitable timber may come from distant valleys, driftwood beaches, abandoned structures, or trading ships. A beam that arrives from across the sea carries a cost measured in labour, risk, and favours owed. Nobody casually trims away a useful section because it looks slightly uneven. A mainstream historical fact is that Viking-age longhouses commonly relied on rows of internal wooden posts to support the roof. The walls did not always carry the entire load. This arrangement allowed heavy roofing materials to rest on a strong internal frame. While turf or other wall materials enclosed the living space and blocked the weather, you stand between two rows of posts that divide the room into a broad central area and narrower side spaces. The posts create a rhythm through the darkness. Each one disappears upward into rafters and crossbeams blackened by years of smoke. The frame resembles an upside-down ship in a quiet, earthy way. Curved lines rise overhead. Long timbers run along the building. joints locked together without the forest of metal brackets you might expect from modern construction. Iron is useful, but is expensive and laborious to produce. Nails may be used where necessary, yet many connections depend on woodworking skill. Mortises, tenons, pegs, notches, and overlapping joints allow the frame to hold itself together. Wooden pegs can swell slightly in damp air, tightening the connection. You watch a carpenter fit a rafter into a prepared notch. He lifts it with 2 assistants while a 4th person guides the upper end. The timber is heavier than it appears. For several tense moments, everyone is holding something large enough to ruin the afternoon. The rafter drops into place with a deep wooden knock. No one celebrates. There are many more rafters. You help carry a shorter brace across the floor. It has been cut from a crooked section of trunk, and its natural angle makes it ideal for supporting a joint. What might look like defective lumber to you becomes exactly the right piece in the carpenter's hands. This careful use of irregular wood is one of the quiet strengths of the building tradition. The builder studies each piece and assigns it a role. Straight trunks become ridge beams or long supports. Forked branches strengthen corners. Short offcuts become pegs, wedges, tool handles, or fuel only when no structural use remains. Even rotten timber may be examined for a sound intersection. Nothing is merely wood. Everything is potential. The ridge beam forms the highest line of the house. Rafters lean against it from both sides, creating the roof slope. Smaller poles cross over the rafters, forming a lattice that supports layers of brushwood, birch bark where available, seaweed in some regions, and finally turf. The exact arrangement depends on local materials. In one settlement, birch bark may provide a water-resistant layer. In another, builders use woven branches, reeds, or overlapping sod. The roof is not a single surface. It's a compressed stack of materials, each performing a different task. The wooden frame bears all of it. Dry turf is heavy. Wet turf is much heavier. Snow adds more. A gathering of curious children climbing onto the roof adds a problem nobody includes in the calculations. You tilt your head upward and try to imagine the pressure. Tons of material pressed downward through the rafters into the posts and finally into the stones beneath them. If the load is uneven, one side may sag. If a post sinks into soft ground, the roof line twists. If a joint loosens, the movement spreads. The house must be flexible enough to settle without immediately breaking, yet rigid enough to resist wind. Carpenters select wood with this balance in mind. Oak, pine, birch, and other species may be used depending on region and availability. Some resist rot better. Some grow straighter. Some are easier to shape. No builder gets to choose from an unlimited supply. So skill often means making imperfect material behave well. Historians still argue whether certain post arrangements reflect distinct regional traditions. The status of a household, changes in available timber, or differences in the activities carried out inside the building. Archaeological traces often preserve post holes rather than the posts themselves, so scholars must reconstruct the standing frame from stains in soil, collapsed walls, and comparisons with later buildings. You glance at the floor and imagine how little may remain in centuries. The great beam above your head could vanish entirely, leaving only a dark circle where a post once stood. From that circle, someone tries to understand the height, angle, and shape of the entire house. It is a little like reconstructing your kitchen from the location of one chair leg. The carpenter moves to a central post with a damaged lower section. Moisture has darkened the wood near the floor. Rot is one of the greatest threats to the frame, particularly where timber touches damp soil. Stone footings help by lifting posts above the wettest ground, but they cannot eliminate the danger. Smoke can preserve upper timbers by discouraging insects and slowing decay. The black coating on the rafters is unpleasant to breathe around, yet it gives the wood a certain protection. The lower posts receive less of that benefit, A worker scrapes the damaged surface with a knife. The outer fibres crumble, but the core remains firm. Instead of replacing the whole post, they prepare a supporting piece to brace it. Timber is too valuable for dramatic gestures. This leads to a quirky detail of northern house repair. A major beam can outlive several versions of the building around it. When walls are rebuilt or a roof is renewed, sound timbers may be reused, sometimes carrying tool marks from earlier structures. A single beam might serve a family longer than a marriage, a feud, or a particularly stubborn goat. The house is therefore not created once. It is assembled, altered, patched, and inherited. You notice carvings near eye level on one of the posts. They are shallow and difficult to see in the dim light. Some may be simple ownership marks. Others could be idle scratches made during a long winter evening. One resembles a ship. Another resembles a man with very ambitious shoulders. Not every mark has sacred meaning. Despite the hopes of future archaeologists, somebody may simply have been bored. The braces are fitted between posts and beams to prevent sideways movement. A vertical frame can carry weight, but strong wind pushes laterally. Angled supports turn that sideways force into pressure along the wood. The frame tightens against itself. You place your hand on a brace while a gust strikes the outer wall. The house gives a faint creak. It does not remain perfectly still. No large wooden structure does. The joints flex, the posts shift by tiny amounts, and the roof settles back. This movement is not necessarily failure. A frame that refuses all motion may crack. One that moves too freely collapses. The builder seeks the narrow comfort between stiffness and flexibility. The interior posts also shape daily life. They define sleeping benches, work areas, storage zones, and pathways. A person learns to move around them without thinking. In dim light, you are less fortunate. You turn too quickly and meet one with your shoulder. The post wins. Along the side of the room, raised platforms rest between the outer wall and the inner supports. These platforms may be used for sitting, sleeping, or storing goods. Their placement takes advantage of the structural grid. The warmest and driest spaces become valuable, while lower corners near the wall collect dampness and cold. Timber partitions divide sections of the house. They do not need to reach the roof. A low screen can block drafts, contain animals, or create a small degree of privacy. Privacy remains a generous term when several relatives can hear you breathe. The roof frame also controls the path of smoke. The slope guides warm air upward, where it gathers beneath the ridge. Openings allow some smoke to escape, though never as efficiently as your watering eyes would prefer. The darkened timbers show where the hottest gases travel. Heat rising from the hearth warms the frame. The wood then releases that warmth slowly into the surrounding air. It is not the main source of insulation, but the entire interior structure participates in holding and redistributing heat. You step onto a ladder while workers place smaller branches across the rafters. The ladder bends with every movement and appears to have been designed by someone who dislikes visitors. At roof height, the room looks different. The central aisle narrows beneath you, heads move through smoke. Lamps glow as small yellow points. The posts form a grid that organizes everything below. A bundle of thin poles is passed upward. You arrange them across the rafters, close enough to support the layers above. Gaps must not be too large or the covering will sag through. The poles do not all match. Some are straight, some curved, and one still has a stubborn twig attached. Over this lattice, workers spread brush and flexible branches. The layer evens out pressure and prevents turf from falling between the supports. A water-resistant membrane may follow, depending on what the landscape provides. Each choice involves compromise. A steep roof sheds water and snow more easily, but it creates greater height and catches more wind. A low slope resists storms but drains more slowly. Thick turf insulates well but increases weight. Thin turf is lighter but loses heat faster. The carpenter does not solve one problem. He balances several problems that dislike one another. You climb down and examine the frame from the doorway. It seems almost delicate compared with the massive walls. Yet every heavy layer depends upon it. The turf hides the precision of the carpentry. Visitors see grass and earth, while the most carefully chosen materials remain in shadow. A child leans against a central post while eating from a wooden bowl. An older woman ties a cord around another, hanging herbs where rising warmth can dry them. A tool rests in a notch. A cloak hangs from a peg. The structural skeleton becomes furniture, storage, workplace, and household companion. The posts are not obstacles added to the room. They are part of how the room functions. You listen as the frame answers the weather with soft groans. Each sound carries through the timber. The house is never silent. Wood clicks as it warms. Pegs tighten in damp air. Rafters flex under the roof. Somewhere overhead, a small amount of soil shifts with a muffled sigh. Yet the structure holds. It holds because the builders understand that scarce timber must work hard. Every post supports weight. Every brace resists movement. Every curved branch finds a purpose. The wooden bones stand beneath the grass, carrying a landscape overhead so that human beings can sit safely in the dim warmth below. You lower yourself onto a wooden bench near the hearth, and notice that the room does not feel heated in the way a modern house does. There is no steady blast of hot air, no glowing metal radiator, and certainly no small digital display allowing you to argue with another person over a single degree. Warmth gathers here slowly. It settles into wool, wood, packed earth, cooking pots, sleeping platforms, and human bodies. The house behaves less like a machine and more like a large earthen container, collecting every useful trace of heat and refusing to surrender it quickly. The hearth burns near the center of the room. Flames move around short pieces of wood, peat and dried fuel. The fire is not enormous. Fuel requires labor to collect, dry, transport, and store, so nobody feeds it carelessly. A roaring blaze may look impressive in a heroic tale, but it also consumes tomorrow's comfort. You stretch your hands toward the flames. The side facing the hearth warms immediately, your back remains cool. Then, little by little, the surrounding room begins to balance the difference. Heat rises from the fire, warms the roof timbers, spreads through smoke, and brushes across the surfaces above you. People nearby absorb part of it. Pots and stones absorb more. The thick turf walls slow the escape. A mainstream historical fact is that turf provides useful insulation because its soil, roots, and trapped air resist rapid changes in temperature. Thick earthen walls do not make heat, but they reduce the speed at which indoor warmth moves outward and outdoor cold moves inward. This means the house responds slowly. If the fire dies for a few minutes, the interior does not instantly become as cold as the landscape. The walls, floor, benches, and stored objects release some of the heat they have absorbed. The room cools gradually rather than suddenly. The same slowness can be inconvenient. A completely cold turf house takes time to warm. You cannot enter, light one cheerful flame, and expect instant comfort. The structure must be heated patiently, and the people inside must contribute. Fortunately, human beings are small furnaces with opinions. Each resting adult releases body heat. Children release heat while moving, talking, and somehow they're appearing in places where they were not standing moments earlier. Dogs curl near sleeping platforms. Cats choose the warmest surface without consulting anyone. Livestock in an adjoining space add warmth of their own. A crowded household may therefore raise the indoor temperature simply by existing. You look around and count several people engaged in evening work. One woman grinds grain. Another repairs clothing. A man shapes a wooden handle. Two children whisper beside a basket, which usually means the basket will soon become involved in an avoidable incident. Every person adds a small amount of heat. Individually, this is modest. Together, in a compact room protected from wind, the effect matters. The interior becomes warmer through accumulation rather than spectacle. You shift closer to the wall and place your hand against a wooden lining board. It feels cool, but now painfully cold. Behind it lies a thick mass of turf. The inner surface changes temperature slowly because the cold outside must pass through layers of soil and roots. The wool stores heat in its mass. During hours of fire, cooking, and activity, the inner layers warm slightly. When the flames weaken, that stored energy returns to the room. This is thermal mass, though nobody around you needs the modern phrase. The household understands the effect through experience. A house occupied every day stays easier to warm than one left empty. A wall that has become deeply chilled takes patience. A room protected from drafts feels comfortable at a lower temperature. Knowledge arrives through winters, not textbooks. You watch someone place a flat stone near the edge of the hearth. It heats slowly. Later, it may be moved near a sleeping place or wrapped carefully to provide warmth. A heated stone can hold energy longer than open air, though it must be handled with care. One careless sleeper discovers that ancient central heating occasionally has corners. Cooking adds another source. A pot hangs above the fire, simmering grain, meat, herbs, and whatever else the household can stretch into supper. Water absorbs a large amount of heat. Steam rises, warming the air while also adding moisture. Bread or flat cakes cook on heated stones. Fat sizzles in a pan. Each task uses heat that serves more than one purpose. The fire prepares food. The food warms the body. The heated pot warms the room. The room protects the next fire from cold drafts. Nothing is wasted if it can be made useful twice. You begin to understand why activities gather around the hearth. It is not simply a place for cooking. It is the center of light, conversation, work, and warmth. People sit according to need, age, status, and tolerance for smoke. The most desirable position is close enough to feel the heat but far enough to keep eyebrows. A person repairing a tool chooses brighter firelight. Someone spinning wool sits where sparks are less likely to reach loose fibers. A sleepy child drifts toward the warmest adult. A dog occupies a location that everyone else had apparently been saving. Heat organizes the social world. The sleeping platforms along the sides of the room hold blankets, hides, straw, and woven covers. These materials trap air around the body. Wool remains useful even when slightly damp, making it especially valuable in a cold, wet climate. You press your hand into a folded wool blanket. It feels thick and oily. The natural grease helps repel some moisture. It does not smell like a modern linen cupboard, unless your modern cupboard contains sheep, smoke, and 2 centuries of determined practicality. At night, several people may sleep close together. Personal space becomes less important than shared warmth. Bodies heat the blankets, and the blankets slow heat loss. Curtains or hanging textiles may enclose sleeping areas, creating smaller pockets of warm air. Even a simple cloth barrier reduces movement around a resting body. A box bed or partly enclosed platform can preserve warmth more effectively than an open bench. A quirky tidbit is that some enclosed sleeping spaces in later northern turf houses resemble cupboards large enough for people. Crawling into one may seem claustrophobic, but a small wooden compartment is easier to warm with body heat. You effectively become the candle inside your own cabinet. The floor contributes in quieter ways. Packed earth does not feel luxurious, yet it changes temperature more slowly than exposed boards suspended over open air. Rushes, straw, skins, and wooden platforms keep feet and bedding away from the coldest surface. In heavily used areas, the floor may be layered with organic material. Fresh rushes cover older ones. Crumbs, ash, hair, and small lost objects disappear beneath them. The result provides some insulation, though it also develops a fragrance that no merchant will successfully bottle. A thin layer of ash near the hearth helps control sparks and may reduce dampness. Warm stones around the fire store heat. Benches, chests, and supplies create additional barriers that slow the movement of air. The room is filled with thermal clutter. Modern design may praise open space, but open space is expensive to warm. Here, every chest and partition breaks up drafts. Every hanging cloth creates a smaller zone. Every sleeping body forms part of a dense arrangement designed by necessity. You notice that the fire is allowed to shrink while the pot continues simmering. The fuel glows rather than flames. Embers produce steady heat and can survive beneath ash for hours. Preserving embers saves the trouble of making a new fire. In a wet landscape, reliable ignition matters. A household may guard its coals carefully, covering them so they remain alive through the night. The person responsible for the hearth checks them with practiced attention. Too much air consumes the fuel. Too little smothers it. The aim is a patient red glow. You lean closer and see tiny points of orange beneath grey ash. They look weak, yet they hold enough heat to revive the fire at dawn. A cold house in the morning is unpleasant. A cold house without living embers is a personal insult from the universe. The architecture supports this economy. Low ceilings keep the warmest air within reach. Heat always rises, but in a tall hall much of it collects uselessly overhead. Here, the roof slopes downward toward the walls, and occupied spaces remain relatively close to the warm layer. The centre near the hearth is warmest. The side platforms are cooler. Storage areas near entrances may remain cold enough to protect certain foods. The house develops temperature zones, each useful for different purposes. Dairy products, dried fish, grain, and preserved meat require careful placement. Too much damp encourages spoilage. Too much warmth may be equally harmful. Families learn which corner stays cool, which shelf remains dry, and which basket attracts the most ambitious mouse. Historians still argue whether builders consciously calculated heat flow in a formal sense, or whether the best designs emerged mainly through inherited practice and gradual adaptation. No one needs written equations to notice that a low roof, thick walls, and narrow openings keep a room warmer. Repeated experience becomes engineering, even when nobody calls it engineering. You feel a faint movement of air near the floor. Cold air enters through the entrance passage and travels toward the hearth. As it warms, it rises. Smoke and hot air move upward toward roof openings. This circulation feeds the fire and keeps the room from becoming completely stagnant. Yet every current carries heat, so openings must remain limited. The household constantly negotiates with the air. Too much ventilation wastes warmth. Too little leaves smoke hanging heavily. Too much fire consumes fuel. Too little leaves dampness everywhere. The comfortable point shifts with wind, temperature, crowding, and cooking. A gust presses against the doorway. The hanging cover moves, but the main room barely changes. The passage absorbs much of the disturbance. The fire flickers once and steadies. You wrap the wool blanket around your shoulders and notice how quickly your own warmth becomes trapped beneath it. The house performs the same trick on a larger scale. The turf walls are the blanket. The roof is another blanket. The surrounding earth adds another. Inside this layered shelter, the hearth does not need to defeat the entire northern winter. It only needs to warm a protected pocket of air, objects, animals, and people. The natural furnace is therefore not a single fire. It is a partnership. Flame provides heat. Bodies provide heat. Cooking provides heat. Stone and earth store it. Wool and trapped air hold it near the skin. Low ceilings keep it near the living space. Thick turf delays its escape. You listen to the small sounds of the room. A spoon scrapes a pot. Wool fibres pull through fingers. Embers settle softly. Someone yawns without covering their mouth, which may be the oldest surviving domestic tradition. Outside, cold air moves freely across the land. Inside, warmth moves slowly. That difference, almost invisible, is what turns a mound of earth into a refuge. The walls do not conquer the climate. They persuade each precious degree to remain a little longer. You shift closer to the central hearth and immediately regret opening your eyes too widely. A ribbon of smoke curls beneath the roof, drifts downward, and finds your face with the determination of a tax collector. The fire burns in a shallow pit lined with stone. Split wood lies across glowing embers, while darker pieces of peat smoulder along one edge. The flames are modest, but the smoke is ambitious. It rises toward the ridge, spreads beneath the rafters, and searches for openings through which it can escape. Some of it succeeds, the rest decides to live with you. You blink until tears gather at the corners of your eyes. Across the room, nobody appears especially concerned. The household has spent years adapting to this air. People sit lower when the smoke thickens. They adjust the fuel, open a vent, or wait for the wind to change direction. You, with your beautifully delicate modern lungs, begin reconsidering every life choice that has brought you here. The central hearth has no tall masonry chimney. Instead, smoke escapes through openings in the roof, gaps near the ridge, or specially arranged vents. In many Viking Age houses, the smoke hole serves several purposes at once. It releases fumes, allows limited daylight inside, and helps draw fresh air toward the fire. A mainstream historical fact is that many Norse longhouses used open hearths without the efficient chimneys familiar from later European homes. Smoke rose into the roof space and escaped gradually through roof vents and natural gaps in the structure. The system works, but not cleanly. You watch the smoke form layers. Hot gases rise quickly from the flames. Near the roof, they spread into a dark cloud. Cooler smoke descends along the sloping timbers, especially when the air outside presses downward through the vent. The room can appear clear near the floor and almost solid overhead. Standing suddenly becomes a poor decision. Children and seated adults remain beneath the thickest layer, while anyone tall enough to reach the rafters receives an immediate lesson in humility. The roof opening must be adjusted carefully. Too small, and smoke fills the living space. Too large, and precious heat rushes out with it. Rain, snow, and strong wind complicate everything. A wooden flap, hide cover, or movable panel may partially shield the opening. Someone must judge the weather and alter the vent accordingly. The task is less like operating a chimney and more like negotiating with a suspicious hole in the roof. You notice an older man studying the smoke. He does not need instruments. The colour, movement, and smell tell him what is happening. Thin grey smoke suggests a hotter, cleaner fire. Heavy dark smoke means damp fuel or poor airflow. Smoke spilling downward may signal changing wind pressure. He shifts one log, opens the vent slightly, and waits. The fire brightens. The smoke rises more steadily. You are impressed until a spark lands near your boot. The arrangement of fuel matters. Wood placed too tightly blocks oxygen. Pieces spaced too widely burn quickly and waste heat. Peat can smoulder for a long time, but damp peat produces thick smoke and a smell that settles into every thread of clothing. Dried animal dung may also be used where wood is scarce. It burns slowly and extends limited fuel supplies. The scent is not exactly festive, but winter survival rarely pauses to consider branding. You inhale cautiously. Your cloak now smells of fire, wool, earth, food, and livestock. There is no point trying to identify each source separately. The aromas have formed a coalition. Fresh air enters close to the floor, often through the doorway and small gaps. The fire pulls that air inward as hot gases rise. This creates a draft that feeds combustion. The path is useful but uncomfortable. Cold air slides across the floor and collects in low places. Feet and ankles suffer while heads remain warm. Sleeping platforms rise above the coldest layer partly for this reason. You stretch one hand toward the flames and tuck both feet beneath the bench. Your body is now experiencing two climates at once. The household knows how to use this uneven environment. Damp shoes rest near the hearth, but not close enough to scorch. Wet wool hangs above the warm zone. Food dries in smoke near the rafters. Tools that require dry storage remain away from the outer walls. Smoke becomes a nuisance and a resource. It discourages insects. It slows the growth of mold on some surfaces. It helps preserve meat and fish. It coats roof timbers with soot and tar, which can offer limited protection from pests and moisture. This does not make smoky air healthy. It simply means the household extracts benefits from a condition it cannot entirely avoid. A strip of fish hangs from a beam in the upper haze. The smoke moves around it day after day, drying the flesh and adding flavour. Bundles of herbs hang nearby. Sausages, meat, and other foods may also occupy the roof space. The ceiling functions as storage, drying rack, smokehouse, and home for spiders with excellent real estate instincts. One quirky tidbit is that soot can accumulate so heavily on rafters that the wood becomes glossy black. In some long-used houses, layers of smoke residue build up over years, preserving traces of domestic life that archaeologists can later examine. You glance upward at the black beams. They seem ancient even while the household moves beneath them. Every meal leaves a faint mark. Every winter adds another film. The roof slowly records cooking habits in soot. A woman leans over the hearth and lowers a pot on an iron chain. The chain allows her to adjust the height above the flames. Raise it, and the food simmers gently. Lower it, and the pot heats faster. She grips the chain with a cloth because iron becomes painfully hot. This is obvious now, though somebody in human history certainly discovered it without the cloth and produced a very memorable sound. The pot begins to bubble. Steam joins the smoke, thickening the air. Moisture gathers on cooler surfaces and settles into clothing. The combination of dampness and soot irritates eyes and throats. You cough. A child imitates you. Another child laughs. Your dignity leaves through the roof vent more efficiently than the smoke. Fire management never stops. Someone must gather fuel, split it, dry it, store it, protect it from rain, and feed it to the hearth. Even a small flame consumes a steady supply. Wood is stacked in the driest available corner. Peat is cut from bogs, shaped into blocks, and left to dry. Dung is collected and prepared. Driftwood is searched for along the shore. Every fuel type behaves differently. Dry birch may catch quickly. Dense wood burns longer. Peat offers steady heat but can smoke heavily. Small twigs help revive embers. Resinous pieces produce bright flames and occasional sparks. The household mixes fuels according to need. Cooking may require a stronger flame. Overnight warmth favors slow embers. Drying wet clothing demands steady heat without excessive sparks. You see a flat stone placed across part of the hearth. It shields coals and supports a pan. Another stone forms a boundary to keep burning material from rolling onto the floor. The hearth itself is positioned with care. Too close to timber, and the frame is endangered. Too near the wall, and heat may dry or damage the turf lining unevenly. At the centre, the fire distributes warmth more broadly and allows people to gather around it. The open flame remains dangerous. Sparks can reach bedding, straw, or hanging textiles. A careless movement may knock over a lamp. A child may step into the wrong place. An animal may panic. Households develop strict habits because one mistake can destroy years of labour. Someone always watches the fire when it burns strongly. Water and sand remain nearby. Fuel is added in controlled amounts. Loose straw is kept at distance. The room appears casual, but every adult notices the hearth from the corner of an eye. Historians still argue whether smoke levels in Norse houses were consistently severe or varied greatly with construction. Fuel quality, weather, and household skill. Archaeological evidence reveals soot and open hearths, but the daily experience may have ranged from tolerable haze to eye-watering misery. You suspect today belongs closer to misery. The wind shifts outside. Smoke that had been moving upward suddenly folds back into the room. People react at once. The roof vent is narrowed on one side and opened on the other. A door covering is lifted briefly. Someone rearranges the fire. Cold air sweeps through the passage and the flames lean. Smoke twists, hesitates, then begins rising again. The adjustment costs heat, but breathing takes priority. This is the central compromise of the house. The same openings that remove smoke also release warmth. The same tight walls that preserve heat also trap fumes. Comfort depends on constant small corrections. There is no perfect setting, only the least irritating one. Oil lamps add their own smoke. A shallow stone or metal bowl holds animal fat or fish oil. A twisted fibre wick rests along the edge and burns with a small flame. The lamp offers precious light, especially during long winter darkness. It also releases odour and soot. Several lamps improve visibility but worsen the air. You hold one near a work surface and see how little space it illuminates, beyond the small circle of yellow light. Faces fade into shadow. The room remains dim even when the hearth burns. Eyes adapt to this darkness. Hands learn familiar tasks by touch. People know where benches, posts, tools, and storage chests stand. You remain the only person repeatedly colliding with furniture. Smoke also changes social behaviour. Conversation takes place at seated height. Work gathers near the clearer air below the roof cloud. Sleeping spaces remain low. A person entering from outside may crouch instinctively if the room is smoky. Status may influence who occupies the warmest or least smoky place. The household leader, honoured guest, elderly relative, or skilled worker may receive a preferred seat. Others make do with colder draughts or stronger fumes. Hospitality, therefore, involves more than offering food. Giving someone a good place near the hearth means sharing comfort, warmth, and breathable air. You are handed a wooden cup and directed to a seat where the smoke is thinner. The gesture feels generous. Then you realise the bench is beside a snoring dog. The dog has no intention of moving. You settle around it. The fire sinks lower as the meal finishes. Large flames are no longer necessary. The cook spreads the embers and covers part of them with ash. Smoke decreases. The room grows darker. A faint red glow remains beneath the grey surface. Heat radiates steadily from the hearthstones. Pots stay warm. Damp clothing continues drying. The air slowly clears as smoke finds its way upward. Your eyes stop watering. Your throat remains scratchy, but the worst discomfort fades. You begin noticing subtler smells again. Cooked grain, charred wood, warm wool, salt fish, a hint of herbs drying overhead. Smoke connects all of them. It preserves food, darkens beams, drives insects away, stains walls, irritates lungs, warms bodies, and signals whether the fire is healthy. It is both helper and intruder. The household does not defeat it. They manage it. You lean back against the bench and watch the final wisps drift into the rafters. The roof opening shows a small patch of grey sky. Cold rain moves across that distant square, but only a few drops enter. Warm air escapes through the same gap. There is no avoiding the loss. The trick is to release enough smoke for breathing while keeping enough warmth for survival. Every adjustment is temporary. Every gust changes the balance. Every new log alters the fire. The house remains warm not because it is sealed completely, but because its people understand when to open it, when to close it, and when to tolerate a little discomfort. You breathe carefully as the embers pulse in the darkness. Your eyes sting less now. Your cloak smells permanently historical. You ease away from the hearth and move toward the darker end of the house, where the air changes again. The smell of smoke remains, but it now mingles with hay, leather, grain, damp wool, and the unmistakable presence of animals who consider indoor living perfectly reasonable. A wooden partition separates the main living area from a lower space filled with rustling bodies. A cacao shifts its weight. Sheep breathe softly through their noses. Somewhere beneath the straw, a hen makes a quiet sound of personal disapproval. The animals are not decorative companions. They are food, wealth, transport, clothing, fertilizer, and insurance against hunger. They are also warm. You lean over the partition and feel heat rising from the enclosed space. Each animal releases warmth through breathing, digestion, and simple existence. A cow produces far more heat than a resting person. Several sheep together create a noticeable pocket of warm air. Keeping livestock close to human living quarters allows some of that warmth to move into the house. It also protects valuable animals from storms, predators, theft, and bitter cold. The arrangement has disadvantages. The disadvantages have smells. A mainstream historical fact is that many northern European longhouses included spaces where people and livestock lived beneath the same roof, often separated by partitions or placed at opposite ends of the building. This shared structure conserved materials and made winter care easier. You step into the animal area and immediately discover that the floor has its own opinions about footwear. Straw and dried vegetation cover the packed earth. Fresh bedding absorbs moisture and provides insulation. Over time, manure, spilled fodder, old straw, and new straw accumulate in layers. The animals stand slightly higher as the winter progresses. This layered bedding can produce heat as organic material slowly decomposes. The process is not dramatic enough to cook dinner, but it adds a little warmth beneath the animals and reduces the chill rising from the ground. You press the toe of your boot into the bedding. It feels springy and faintly warm. Then your boot sinks farther than expected. You decide not to investigate. The partition is built from rough boards and woven branches plastered with clay in places. It blocks direct drafts and keeps larger animals from wandering among sleeping people. It does not block sound. A cow chews steadily. A sheep scratches against the wall. A goat tests a wooden latch with the focused patience of someone solving a military problem. Every movement carries through the building. At night, these sounds become part of the household rhythm. People learn which thump is harmless, which rustle means an animal has shifted position, and which sudden crash means the goat has once again achieved its professional goals. You help carry an armful of hay from a storage corner. The hay must remain dry enough to resist mold. It is stacked away from open flame but close enough for easy feeding. Winter fodder requires careful planning. Animals cannot graze when deep snow covers the ground or storms keep them indoors. Grass must be cut during warmer months, dried, gathered, transported, and stored. Every mouth in the building depends upon work performed many months earlier. A poor hay harvest threatens more than comfort. Families may be forced to slaughter animals they hope to keep for breeding, milk, wool, or labour. A successful household therefore measures winter not only in days but in bundles of fodder. You place hay in a wooden rack. The sheep press forward at once, apparently convinced that starvation began 3 minutes ago. One tugs an entire strand from your sleeve. Another begins chewing the edge of your cloak. Viking hospitality is generous, but the livestock take it too far. Nearby, sacks of grain rest on raised boards. Keeping them above the floor protects them from dampness. Barley, oats, and rye may be stored for food, brewing, seed, and animal feed. Each sack represents months of labour. Fields must be cleared, ploughed, planted, weeded, harvested, dried, threshed, and winnowed. Losing grain to moisture or pests is not a small inconvenience. It is a threat to survival. The sacks are tied tightly, yet mice need only one weak seam. A cat patrols beneath the platform with professional seriousness. It pauses, listens, and disappears between two chests. The household values the cat for more than companionship. A skilled mouser protects grain, dried food, textiles, and leather from rodents. One quirky tidbit is that cats held a notable place in Norse life and mythology. The goddess Freya is famously associated with a chariot drawn by cats, which suggests that even divine transportation can depend on animals who refuse to follow instructions. The cat emerges without a mouse and sits down to wash one paw. Its performance review appears postponed. Storage fills every usable space. Wooden chests line the walls. Baskets hang from pegs. Tools rest beneath benches. Bundles of wool occupy shelves. Dried fish hangs from rafters where air and smoke help preserve it. A modern room may separate sleeping, cooking, storage, and work. This house compresses them together. Every object must earn its place. A chest serves as storage, table, seat, an occasional barrier against a determined chicken. A bench serves as bed, workplace, and meeting place. A post supports the roof, holds tools, anchors a partition, and collects carved initials from bored children. Nothing performs only one task. You open a chest and find folded textiles packed closely together. Wool blankets, cloaks, tunics, and woven bands hold trapped air, making the chest itself a block of insulation against the outer wall. Clothing is valuable. Producing wool fabric requires shearing, cleaning, combing, spinning, dyeing, weaving, cutting, and sewing. A single garment represents countless hours of work. You lift a heavy cloak. It is thick, slightly greasy, and patched at one shoulder. The repair is careful enough to extend its life for years. People do not discard clothing because fashion has changed. Fashion can wait until the sheep have finished growing another wardrobe. At the sleeping platforms, several layers create protection from the cold. Wooden boards lift the sleeper above the floor. Straw-filled sacks soften the surface. Animal hides reduce heat loss. Wool blankets trap warm air near the body. Sleeping positions are negotiated according to age, status, health, and family relationships. Elderly people may receive warmer places. Small children sleep beside adults. Guests are fitted wherever space allows. You lower yourself onto one platform and immediately roll toward the person beside you because the bedding slopes inward. Nobody seems troubled. Close sleeping conserves heat. Two bodies beneath shared coverings remain warmer than one body alone. A group creates a small climate beneath wool and fur. Personal boundaries grow flexible. You may awaken with a child's foot against your ribs, a dog across your legs, and someone else's hair in your mouth. This is considered a successful night because nobody freezes. Dogs move freely between social roles. Some guard the building, some help with herding, some hunt. Some lie beside sleeping people and contribute warmth while pretending this service requires no effort. A large dog curls near the edge of your platform. Its coat carries moisture from outside, but its body radiates heat. You place your feet close to it. The dog opens one eye, considers charging rent, and returns to sleep. Animals also affect the air. Their breath adds humidity. Wet hides bring moisture inside. Manure releases strong odors and gases. Ventilation must continue even when the weather is cold. The household cannot simply seal every opening and enjoy unlimited warmth. Dampness would gather on walls and timbers. Bedding would remain wet. Food would spoil. Lungs would suffer. Someone clears a small vent near the livestock area. Cold air enters, but stale air escapes. Once again, comfort depends on accepting a measured loss of heat. You watch a woman milk a cow into a wooden vessel. The work must be done even when the weather is terrible. Milk provides food that can be consumed fresh or turned into butter, curds, whey, and cheese. Dairy products transform a perishable liquid into forms that last longer. This matters in a world without electric refrigeration, supermarkets, or the soothing certainty of a midnight snack aisle. The cow flicks its tail. The vessel wobbles. Everyone nearby reacts faster than you. Not a drop is wasted. Food storage requires constant attention. Dried fish must stay away from dampness. Meat may be salted, smoked, fermented, or dried. Grain must be protected from insects. Butter can be stored in containers and sometimes preserved in cool conditions. The cooler sections of the house become useful storage zones. A chamber near an outer wall may remain cold enough to slow spoilage. A pit beneath the floor may hold certain foods. Barrels and tubs fit against walls where they also block drafts. The building develops an internal map of temperature and moisture. Warmest near the hearth, colder near entrances, drier high in the smoke, dampest close to outer turf. The household knows this map without drawing it. Historians still argue whether people and livestock commonly shared one undivided hall during the Viking Age, or whether many houses used more complex separation than older reconstructions suggest. Archaeological evidence varies by site, and building layouts change across regions, wealth levels, and centuries. What remains clear is that animals often stayed close enough to shape the warmth, smell, labour, and sound of domestic life. You follow a narrow passage between storage chests and the partition. The path is barely wide enough for one person. Clutter limits free movement, yet it also reduces empty air that must be warmed. The more densely packed the interior becomes, the less exposed space surrounds each person. Stored grain, folded wool, barrels, baskets, and bodies all absorb heat. They then release it slowly when the fire weakens. The house is full of small thermal reservoirs. Even food contributes. A pot of hot porridge warms the hands and stomach. Fresh bread releases steam. Warm milk carries heat directly into the body. The household does not separate heating from eating. Calories become body warmth. Fire becomes cooked food. Animal fodder becomes milk, wool, and living heat. Energy moves through the building in a chain. Grass feeds the cow warms the buyer, milk feeds the family warms the sleeping platform. The turf contains the warmth. You sit beside the partition while the animals settle. The sheep stop shifting and the cow lowers its head. A hen tucks itself into straw. Human voices soften as bedding is arranged. One lamp remains lit. Its glow reaches the nearest faces and fades quickly beyond them. Shadows from hanging tools stretch across the wall. A child curls beneath a wool cover. An adult pulls the edge tighter around both of them. Another person places a folded cloak against a draft near the platform. The dog circles 3 times and lies down with great ceremony. You fit yourself into the remaining space and discover that your shoulders touch one sleeper while your knees nearly reach another. The air is warmer here than near the floor. Beneath the blankets, heat gathers quickly. Wool scratches your neck. Straw rustles beneath you. The animal area releases a steady, living warmth through the partition. The smell is powerful, but your nose gradually stops protesting. Outside, the night spreads across the fields, empty and cold. Inside, every creature contributes something. The cow offers heat and milk. The sheep offer warmth and wool. The cat guards the grain when motivated. The dog guards the people and occupies half the bedding. Human beings feed the animals, tend the fire, repair the walls, and share the protected air. No single body produces enough warmth to defeat winter. Together, packed beneath one roof among food, tools, wool, straw, and livestock, the household becomes its own slow-burning furnace. You lie beneath the wool coverings while the wind strengthens beyond the turf walls. At first it sounds distant, a low murmur sliding over the grass. Then a heavier gust strikes the house and presses against the roof with a long, hollow breath. The timbers answer with soft creaks. Loose objects tremble on their pegs. A few grains of soil fall from somewhere overhead and land beside your face. Nobody moves. You remain awake for a moment, wondering whether the roof has just offered a polite warning or begun a slow collapse. The family around you continue sleeping. Their confidence is reassuring, although it may also mean they're too tired to care. Another gust arrives, harder than the first. The house does not stand proudly against it. It does something wiser. It crouches. Its low walls present little surface for the storm to seize. The sloping roof guides much of the wind upward. Turf covering softens sharp edges where air might catch and pull. Instead of rising above the landscape like a wooden tower, the dwelling presses into it. From outside, it resembles a hill with domestic responsibilities. You pull the blanket closer and listen. Rain strikes the roof, but the sound is muted by soil and grass. Individual drops vanish into the thick covering. Water spreads through the upper turf instead of hammering directly against boards. This quiet can be deceptive. The roof may sound calm while absorbing a tremendous amount of rain. Every wet layer grows heavier. The wooden frame carries not only dry turf but water held in soil, plant roots, and moss. If drainage fails, the roof becomes an enormous saturated sponge balanced above everyone's bed. A mainstream historical fact is that turf houses were often built low and broad to withstand the severe winds of North Atlantic regions. Thick walls and heavy roofs gave them stability in places where exposed wooden buildings could suffer serious storm damage. Weight becomes an advantage when wind tries to lift the roof. That same weight becomes a danger when beams weaken. The household depends upon a careful balance between mass and support. Strong rafters carry the load downward. Posts transfer it into stone footings. Turf presses the roof, covering firmly in place. A light roof might tear away. A roof this heavy prefers to stay exactly where it is, mostly because moving would require the cooperation of several tons of earth. The storm grows louder near the entrance. Wind pushes into the passage, rattling the wooden covering and forcing cold air along the floor. Someone rises from the bedding, wraps a cloak around bare shoulders, and checks the door. You follow with less grace. Your feet meet the cold floor. Instant regret travels through your legs. The doorway is the weakest point in the protective shell. It must open for people, tools, food, animals, and smoke management. Every useful opening is also an invitation to weather. The outer door is made from fitted boards reinforced with cross pieces. Leather straps or iron hinges allow it to move. A wooden bar can secure it during severe conditions. The person beside you presses the bar into place and stuffs folded wool into a narrow gap. The draft weakens. A second hanging barrier farther inside helps block the remaining air. This layered entrance creates a small trapped zone where wind loses much of its force before reaching the living space. You stand in that passage and feel the storm on one side, warmth on the other. Only a few steps separate them. The difference feels like crossing between worlds. Water runs beneath the threshold in a thin line. A shallow channel guides it toward the outer slope. Someone clears mud and straw from the groove using a short wooden scraper. Drainage channels must remain open during heavy rain. A blocked ditch can direct water against the turf wall, where it may seep inward and soften the lower layers. The house survives not because it is perfectly sealed, but because water is given somewhere else to go, outside. Small trenches lead away from the structure. Stones reinforce the most vulnerable ground. The building site itself may be slightly raised or placed where natural slopes carry water downward. Choosing the location requires knowledge of wind direction, soil, snow movement, and seasonal flooding. A pleasant summer hollow can become a winter pond. A scenic ridge can become a launching platform for household furniture. The safest place is often less dramatic, tucked against a slope that offers shelter without trapping too much water. Historians still argue whether some Viking settlements were laid out according to formal planning principles, or developed gradually as households responded to land ownership, drainage, access to resources, and local weather. The arrangement often looks irregular, but irregularity can contain generations of practical decisions. The settlement around you faces the storm in scattered clusters. Buildings sit near one another without forming neat streets. Storage sheds, workshops, animal shelters, and homes create pockets where wind speed drops. One structure protects the next. Fences interrupt drifting snow. Stone walls redirect gusts. Natural ridges provide shelter. The landscape itself becomes part of the architecture. You step outside with a household worker to inspect the wall. The rain hits your face sideways. It takes only a few breaths for your cloak to become wet again. The grass roof ripples under the wind, but the turf beneath it stays firm. Roots bind the surface into a flexible mat. Water streams down the slope and falls from the eaves. There are no long, projecting roof edges. Large overhangs would give the wind something to lift. The roof remains compact, close to the walls, and difficult to grip. You place one hand against the outer turf. It feels slick and cold. A small section near the corner has begun to erode. Rain has exposed dark soil beneath the grass. Left us alone. The damage could widen as each storm removes more material. The worker pushes a fresh turf patch into the weak spot and pins it temporarily with wooden stakes. Grass side faces outward. The roots of the new piece will eventually blend with the older surface. The repair resembles bandaging a hill. You hold the patch in place while mud runs down your sleeve. The worker adjusts it twice. Apparently even hills have standards. Snow creates a different challenge. When it settles gently, snow traps air and adds insulation. A smooth white layer can make the house even warmer by covering roof and walls. When driven by wind, snow gathers into deep drifts against one side. The pressure may block entrances, bury vents, and add uneven weight. A door opening must sometimes be cleared repeatedly through the night. Smoke holes cannot be allowed to disappear beneath packed snow. You imagine waking beneath a beautiful white landscape, unable to leave because winter has politely bricked up the doorway. A shovel stays near the entrance for this reason. Snow also reveals air leaks. Warmth escaping through a weak spot melts the snow above it. The melted area shows where insulation is thin, where turf has shifted, or where heat is travelling through a gap. Builders can read the roof by watching these patterns. An evenly covered roof suggests that warmth remains contained. A bare patch may signal a problem. The house quietly displays its weaknesses in the snow. One quirky tidbit is that grazing animals may climb onto turf roofs in search of grass. Goats are particularly willing to treat a house as an elevated pasture. This sounds charming until several heavy animals gather above a weakened beam. A child spots a goat on the roof and throws a small clod of earth toward it. The goat looks down with the calm superiority of a creature that has discovered private dining. It does not move. An adult must climb partway up and encourage it with a stick. The goat finally jumps down, landing close enough to make you question whether Norse gods occasionally take the form of badly behaved livestock. The storm shifts from rain to sleet. Tiny pieces of ice strike your hood. You return indoors, where the air seems wonderfully still. Wet outer clothing is removed near the entrance so it does not spread moisture through the sleeping area. Cloaks hang from pegs. Boots rest beside absorbent straw. Water dripping from garments is collected in shallow grooves or wiped away. A wet household loses warmth quickly because energy must evaporate all that moisture. Dryness is almost as valuable as heat. The fire is strengthened slightly, not to make the room hot, but to help clothing dry and prevent dampness from settling into bedding. Steam rises from wool. People turn garments at intervals. Sleeves face the warmth, then backs, then hoods. Nobody places them directly over the flames. A cloak that catches fire is technically dry, but the method receives poor reviews. Storm damage may remain hidden. A rafter can crack without falling. A post can shift slightly on its footing. Turf can separate beneath the visible grass. Householders learn the warning signs. A new creak, a dip in the roofline, soil falling in one location, water appearing where the wall was previously dry, a door that no longer closes correctly. Each clue suggests movement in the structure. During a lull, someone lifts a lamp and examines the central supports. You follow the yellow light along the beams. Soot hides small marks, so fingers feel for splits. One joint has loosened. A wedge is tapped deeper into place with a wooden mallet. The sound travels through the frame. The repair takes only a moment because the problem is found early. Neglect allows small movement to become dangerous. A sagging roof directs water into a hollow. The hollow grows wetter and heavier. Extra weight increases the sag. Eventually, a minor weakness becomes a circular argument conducted by gravity. Families therefore inspect the building repeatedly, especially following strong weather. The roof is walked carefully when conditions allow. Soft spots are identified. Drains are cleared. Turf is replaced. Living beneath Earth demands attention to what the Earth is doing. The wind reaches another peak. The roof groans. The door presses against its bar, and the fire leans toward the passage. Everyone pauses. For several breaths. The building feels like a ship moving through an invisible sea. Then the gust passes. Conversation resumes. A spindle turns. A spoon scrapes the bottom of a bowl. Someone tells a story without raising their voice. The ordinary activity is part of the defense. Storms may last for days. Fear cannot remain at full strength for that long. People work, eat, mend, and sleep while weather attacks the outer shell. You sit among them and hear the difference between danger and noise. The house makes many sounds without failing. Timber bends, turf settles, rain drains, wind searches. The structure yields slightly and then steadies. Outside, the settlement disappears behind darkness and sleet. Paths vanish. Fields become invisible. The sea can only be heard as a deeper roar beyond the walls. Inside, the room remains dim, crowded, and warm enough. The storm does not stop. It simply fails to enter. You wake beneath wool coverings to the sound of a handmill turning somewhere in the dim room. Stone grinds against stone with a patient scraping rhythm. It is not loud enough to alarm you, but it is far too persistent to ignore. Morning has arrived, not with bird song or sunlight, but with someone converting grain into breakfast through determined circular effort. You open your eyes. The interior remains almost dark. A pale stripe of daylight enters through the doorway as someone lifts the covering. Smoke hangs beneath the roof, and the hearth glows red under a blanket of ash. Bodies begin unfolding from benches and platforms. Blankets are shaken. Straws pushed back into place, and sleeping spaces become workspaces again. There is no room devoted only to sleep. The same bench that supports your head at night may hold weaving tools by midday and bowls by evening. Every surface changes purpose as the household moves through its routine. You sit upright and discover a strand of straw inside your tunic. The straw has spent the night exploring. No one offers assistance. The first task is reviving the fire. A woman kneels beside the hearth and scrapes ash away from the buried embers. She adds dry moss, thin shavings, and small twigs. Her breath feeds the glow until a faint flame appears. The flame is treated with attention rather than excitement. It means warm food, workable light, dry clothing, and a place around which the day can organize itself. A clay pot receives water and grain. The mixture will become porridge, which appears so regularly that you begin to suspect the entire Viking world rests upon it. A mainstream historical fact is that daily life in Norse households depended heavily on labor performed inside the home. Spinning, weaving, food preparation, tool repair, woodworking, leatherwork, and childcare often took place around the central living area, especially during cold or stormy weather. The house is not merely a place where work pauses. It is a workshop with beds. You move toward the grinding stone. The upper stone has a hole in the center for grain and a wooden handle near the edge. One person turns it while another feeds small amounts of barley or oats into the opening. You take the handle. The stone resists at first, then begins circling. Flour gathers along the rim in a coarse pale line. Your shoulders warm quickly. After several minutes, the task becomes less like cooking and more like punishment designed by bread. The household needs flour every day, so the labor repeats endlessly. Grain must be ground slowly enough to avoid wasting it. Small pieces of stone may break loose and mixed with the flour. Over years, eating bread made from such meal can wear teeth down. You glance at the millstone. It glances back without remorse. Nearby, wool work has already begun. A basket holds fleece that has been washed and sorted. Fingers tease apart tangled fibres, removing bits of grass and dirt. Combs or cards straighten the wool before spinning. A woman holds a distaff under one arm while a spindle turns below her hand. She draws out a thin line of fibre, twists it, and allows the spindle's weight to keep the thread moving. The process looks effortless until you try. Your first length of yarn is thick as rope in one place and thin as spider silk in another. It snaps. Your second attempt coils around the spindle in a shape that may have religious significance, but no textile value. The experienced spinner quietly takes the tool back. Producing cloth requires enormous time. Wool must pass through many hands before it becomes a tunic, sail, blanket, cloak, or wall hanging. Even simple fabric contains hundreds of hours of invisible labour. The loom stands upright near one wall. Long threads hang from a horizontal beam, held taut by heavy loom, weights of stone or baked clay. The weaver passes the cross thread through them, then presses each row into place. The weights hang near the floor in neat groups. They click softly when the threads move. You crouch to examine one and nearly upset the entire arrangement. Several people inhale sharply. You retreat as though leaving a sacred shrine. A vertical loom uses little floor space compared with a large horizontal frame, which suits a crowded room. It can also be dismantled or leaned aside when another task needs the wall. Coloured yarn appears in a basket. Dyes may come from plants, lichens, bark, roots, and imported materials. Browns, yellows, reds, blues, and greens can all be produced, though the exact shade depends on the dye, the wool, the water, and the skill of the worker. Bright clothing is not unknown in the Norse world. The popular image of everyone dressed permanently in mud-coloured fabric says more about old costume departments than the full range of archaeological evidence. One quirky tidbit is that certain dyes can produce unexpected smells during preparation. Fermented dye vats may involve stale urine because ammonia helps some colours bond to wool. You look toward a covered vessel near the loom. Suddenly, you understand why it has been placed far from breakfast. The interior is filled with separate islands of work. Near the light from the entrance, a man sharpens an iron knife against a stone. Beside him, another repairs a leather shoe using an awl and waxed thread. The shoe has been cut from soft hide and shaped to wrap around the foot. Soles wear quickly on stone and rough ground, so repairs are common. You remove one boot and inspect it. A hole near the toe explains several recent experiences with mud. The leatherworker turns it over, presses the damaged area, and gives you a look normally reserved for neglected livestock. A patch is cut, softened, and stitched in place. The work is small but important. Cold, wet feet reduce a person's usefulness remarkably quickly. Tools are repaired with the same care. Wooden handles split, iron edges dull, bone needles break, buckles bend. Nothing is replaced casually when it can be restored. A broken comb may be reshaped. A cracked bowl may receive a metal staple. A damaged chest may be reinforced. Possessions remain in use long enough to collect scars, patches, and family stories. The room's light changes as people move. Someone opens the door and grey daylight stretches across the floor. The covering falls and darkness returns. Oil lamps help, but fuel is precious. Most detailed work takes place close to the hearth, doorway, or a small wall opening. Eyes strain during the darkest months. Hands compensate. Experienced workers recognize materials by touch. A spinner feels where the yarn is even. A carver detects the grain of wood through the blade. A seamstress guides a needle through cloth in light that seems barely sufficient to locate the cloth. You attempt threading a needle. The needle disappears. After a long search, it is found attached to your sleeve. This becomes the morning's entertainment. Children move among the adults, observing and helping. Small tasks teach them how the household functions. One gathers wood chips, another carries a bowl. An older child watches a baby while adults work. Learning is not separated neatly from labour. Skills pass through imitation, correction, and repeated responsibility. A child who can twist cord begins with short fibers. A child who can carry water receives a small vessel. A child who can identify useful plants joins gathering trips. Mistakes occur under the eyes of relatives who remember them forever. The baby begins crying near the wall. Its mother lifts it without stopping her conversation. The child is wrapped in wool and held close to her body, where warmth and movement soon quiet it. Privacy is limited, and conversations, arguments, illness, sleep, and bodily needs all unfold within earshot of other people. Partitions and hanging cloths provide some separation, but sound travels easily. A whisper near one bench becomes public knowledge by supper. Personal secrets require either exceptional discipline or a very long walk outside. Even sanitation becomes part of household routine. Waste must be carried away from the living space. Containers may be used at night, especially during severe weather. Refuse collects in designated areas outside, often forming middens filled with bones, ash, broken tools, shells, and household debris. To future archaeologists, these rubbish heaps become valuable records. A discarded fish bone can reveal diet. A broken comb can suggest trade or craftsmanship. Seeds can show which plants grew nearby. To you, the midden is mainly a pile that should be approached from upwind. Historians still argue whether particular rooms in excavated Norse houses had fixed specialized purposes or changed function according to season, household size, and daily need. A space containing loom weights may indicate weaving, yet the same area could also have served for sleeping, storage, or food preparation at different times. The building remains flexible because life refuses to stay neatly categorized. At midday, the porridge pot is removed from the hearth. Wooden bowls are passed around. Each person receives a portion, perhaps with milk, butter, dried fruit, or a little meat if supplies allow. You eat with a spoon carved from wood or horn. The porridge is thick, hot, and deeply committed to being porridge. Conversation continues around you. News travels through visitors, traders, relatives, seasonal workers, and returning sailors. A household may hear about marriages, feuds, weather, prices, births, deaths, and political changes from people who have crossed large distances. Oral storytelling gives shape to these reports. An ordinary event becomes sharper with repetition. A difficult voyage gains larger waves. A stubborn horse becomes nearly supernatural. A minor argument develops enough dramatic detail to occupy 3 winter evenings. Stories also preserve genealogies, lore, poetry, and memory. Skilled speakers can hold a room's attention without books, screens, or the modern miracle of pretending to listen while checking something else. Someone begins recounting a dispute over grazing rights. The tale includes neighbors, boundaries, witnesses, and an insult involving a cow. You expect the story to end quickly. It does not. The cow receives an ancestry, a personality, and a legal significance greater than your own. Games appear when work slows. A small board is placed on a chest, and carved pieces are arranged across it. Games of strategy, including forms related to tafel, challenge players to trap, defend, or escape. The rules vary, and the disagreement over rules begins before the first move. You play against a quiet older man. Within minutes, your pieces are surrounded. He has not smiled once. You suspect you have been defeated socially as well as strategically. Dice and simple games of chance may also pass the time, though gambling can create arguments. Children play with carved animals, small boats, knuckle bones, and whatever object adults have not secured properly. Music sometimes fills the room. A bone flute, stringed instrument, or singing voice rises over the crackle of the hearth. Rhythm helps repetitive labor and makes the darkness feel less enclosed. Poetry carries prestige. A clever verse can praise a host, mock a rival, preserve a deed, or turn an unfortunate haircut into public memory. Gentle entertainment remains dangerous when everyone you know can compose insults. As evening gathers, tools return to pegs and chests. Loose wool is covered. The loom stands silent. Bowls are scraped clean. The floor is swept with a bundle of twigs, though swept mainly means the dirt is reorganized into a more respectable pattern. Smoke thickens as the fire is prepared for cooking again. The room shifts once more. Workshop becomes kitchen. Kitchen becomes gathering place. Gathering place becomes sleeping hall. Nothing physically moves very far, yet the purpose of every corner changes. You settle on the bench with repaired footwear, tired shoulders, and a new appreciation for how much labour hides inside ordinary objects. A blanket is not merely warm. It is sheep tending, shearing, washing, spinning, dyeing, weaving, and mending. A bowl is not merely a bowl. It is selected wood, shaped by iron, polished by use, and repaired when cracked. Daily life fills the turf house with motion. Thread twists, grain breaks, leather bends. Children learn, stories lengthen, light fades. The earthen walls hold all of it together, not only warmth, but voices, smells, patience, irritation, skill, and the steady rhythm of work that makes survival look almost ordinary. You step outside on a mild morning and discover that the house has changed shape. Nothing dramatic has happened during the night. No wall has fallen, no beam has snapped. Yet the roof line seems lower near one corner. The grass grows thicker over the entrance, and a narrow crack has opened where two turf layers meet. A turf house is never completely still. Rain compresses it, frost lifts it, roots spread through it. Soil settles under its own weight. Timber expands in damp weather and contracts when dry. Each season makes tiny adjustments, and the household must answer with adjustments of its own. You climb onto the roof with a short cutting tool and immediately feel the ground move beneath your feet. Not enough to collapse, but enough to remind you that you are standing on grass supported by branches above a room full of relatives. This is gardening with unusually serious consequences. The roof has grown shaggy. Long grass catches the wind and holds moisture against the surface. Small flowering plants have appeared near the ridge, along with a stubborn shrub whose roots are beginning to reach too deeply. The grass cannot simply be ignored. Healthy roots help bind the turf, but excessive growth adds weight and may damage the layers beneath. The roof must be trimmed, grazed carefully, or cut by hand. You kneel and remove the shrub. Its roots resist with impressive determination. For several moments, you're involved in a personal dispute with a plant growing above someone's bed. The plant loses, although it takes part of the roof with it. A worker immediately presses fresh sod into the hole. Loose soil fills the edges. The patch is stamped down gently until it sits level with the surrounding surface. Repairs like this happen constantly. A turf roof is not replaced only when it fails completely. Small weak spots are corrected throughout the year. Bare soil receives new grass. Thin edges gain another layer. Channels are reshaped to guide water away. A mainstream historical fact is that turf buildings require frequent maintenance because their organic materials decay, compress, and erode. Walls and roofs may be renewed in stages, with fresh turf added over older construction rather than the entire house being rebuilt at once. This creates layers. A wall that appears solid from outside may contain several generations of repair. Fresh blocks cover older blocks. New foundations rest beside earlier ones. A doorway shifts slightly. A room narrows as additional turf is placed against its interior face. The house slowly records the labour of everyone who lives in it. You descend from the roof and examine a wall near the storage area. The lower courses have begun bulging outward. Moisture has softened the fill, and the weight above is pressing unevenly. The repair cannot be solved with a decorative patch. Several layers must be removed. Workers cut into the wall carefully, exposing dark bands of soil, roots, ash, and older turf. Each band reveals a different stage in the building's life. Some pieces are firm enough to reuse, others crumble as soon as they are lifted. You carry the weak material away in baskets. It is heavier than it looks. This remains true every time, as though turf enjoys preserving the surprise. The damaged section is opened down to the stone base. Mud is cleared from around the foundation. A small drainage channel is deepened so future rain will move away more quickly. New blocks are selected for strength. They are laid in overlapping courses, pressed tightly, and tied into the surviving wall with long strips of sod. The repair must connect old material and new material without creating a seam that wind or water can exploit. This is more difficult than building a fresh wall. The existing structure has settled into an irregular shape. No surface is perfectly level. Each new block must be cut to fit the distortion. The builder studies the gap, trims a block, places it, removes it, trims it again, and returns it to exactly the same position. You attempt to help by suggesting that it looks close enough. The builder gives you a stare that could preserve fish. You become quiet. Timber repairs require equal patience. A roof beam may weaken near one end while remaining sound through most of its length. Replacing the entire piece would waste valuable wood, so carpenters splice new timber into the damaged section. The weakened end is cut away. A fresh piece is shaped to overlap it. Pegs, notches, and bindings hold the joint together. A temporary support post stands beneath the roof while the work continues. Everyone moves carefully around it because one careless shove could transfer more weight than the new joint is ready to bear. The carpenter taps a wooden peg into place. The roof answers with a low groan. Several people look upward. The carpenter listens, taps once more, then stops. That final tap contains more confidence than you currently possess. Rot hides where wood meets damp earth or where water enters through the roof. The surface may appear firm while the interior has softened. Builders test suspicious areas with knives, awls, and small blows from a tool. A clear hard sound suggests solid timber. A dull response suggests trouble. The process resembles a physician examining a patient, except the patient weighs several tons and may fall on the physician. Smoke helps preserve some upper timbers, but soot also hides cracks. Cleaning one section reveals old tool marks and a narrow split running along the grain. The split is bound with a wooden collar and supported by a brace. It may remain useful for years. Old houses become forests of such interventions. One beam is original. Another comes from a dismantled shed. A post once served in a ship repair. A carved plank may have belonged to a chest. Materials travel from one object to another until they are too damaged for anything except fuel. Even then, the final burning provides heat. One quirky tidbit is that turf houses can gradually rise, sink, widen, and narrow as generations add material and rebuild damaged areas. A doorway that begins at comfortable height may become awkwardly low as floors accumulate and walls settle. You enter one older room and strike your head on the lintel. The family doesn't react. This has clearly happened to every visitor since the previous winter. Floor levels change because new layers are placed over old ones. Rushes, straw, ash, soil, and household debris build up over time. When the surface becomes uneven or damp, fresh material covers it. A wooden platform may need raising. A door may need trimming. A hearth may be rebuilt slightly higher. The interior evolves in small vertical steps until a tall person must move with the posture of a guilty servant. Seasonal work follows a familiar rhythm. Spring reveals damage caused by frost and winter moisture. Roofs are inspected when snow melts. Drains are cleared. Collapsed edges are rebuilt. Summer offers longer days and drier conditions for major repairs. Turf can be cut and transported. Timber can be shaped outdoors. Walls have time to settle before cold weather returns. Autumn brings urgent preparation. Weak patches are sealed. Fuel is stored. Roof grass is trimmed. Loose doors are adjusted. Winter allows only essential repairs, usually performed in wind, darkness, and language that would violate the peaceful mood of your evening. Maintenance competes with every other task. Fields need tending. Animals need care, fishing, weaving, food preservation, and trade cannot pause simply because one wall has developed ambitions. A household delays work when possible, then acts quickly when delay becomes dangerous. The skill lies in knowing the difference. A small damp patch may wait. A shifting post may not. A few loose turf blocks can be replaced next week. A sagging ridge beam receives attention immediately, even if supper is already on the fire. Children learn these judgments by watching adults. They help carry sod, gather stones, clear channels, and pass tools. Their first repairs may be clumsy, but the knowledge must continue because the building demands it. No written manual hangs beside the doorway. The house itself teaches through leaks, drafts, stains, and creaks. You follow an older builder around the exterior. She presses her foot against the base of the wall, examining its firmness. She pulls at grass near one seam. She studies the angle of runoff from the roof. Nothing escapes her attention. At one corner, she inserts a thin wooden probe into the turf. It comes out dark and wet. The outer surface looks healthy, but moisture has collected within. The corner is opened, dried where possible, and rebuilt with better drainage. Without intervention, the dampness might reach nearby timber and begin a chain of decay. The repair seems excessive until you understand that buildings rarely fail from one sudden cause. They fail through connected neglect. A blocked channel wets a wall. A wet wall softens. A softened wall shifts. The shift opens a roof seam. The seam admits more water. Eventually everyone is standing outside in the rain discussing who should have cleared the channel. Preventing this conversation is a major architectural achievement. Historians still argue whether the frequent rebuilding visible at some Norse sites reflects ordinary maintenance. Changes in household size, shifts in status, environmental decline, or periods of abandonment and resettlement. The layers do not always explain themselves. A rebuilt wall may mark prosperity, disaster, inheritance, or simple exhaustion. Archaeologists examine soil colours, post holes, floor deposits, plant remains, and tool marks to separate one building phase from another. A few centimetres of earth may represent decades of life. You stand beside an abandoned structure at the edge of the settlement. Its doorway has collapsed. Grass covers the walls completely. The roof has sunk inward, creating a shallow hollow. It no longer protects a household, yet it has not disappeared. Turf returns slowly to the landscape. Timber rots beneath it. Stones remain in lines. Plants spread across the ruins. A passerby might see only an uneven mound. Someone who knows the signs sees rooms, benches, entrances, and generations of repair. Useful material is taken from abandoned houses. Sound beams are removed. Stones are carried to new foundations. Strong turf blocks may be cut again. The old building feeds the next one. Even ruins remain part of the settlement's resources. You return to the occupied house and help place the final block into the repaired wall. The fresh turf is dark against the older surface. Its edges are visible now, but grass will soften them over time. Rain will press it. Roots will bind it. Winter will test it. The repair may last years, or another weakness may appear beside it next spring. There is no final victory over decay. There is only attention. The house survives because people continue touching it, reading it, cutting into it, and restoring what weather takes away. Its natural furnace remains warm only because hands keep rebuilding the shell around that warmth. You brush soil from your sleeves and step back. The wall looks whole again. Not new. Whole, that distinction matters. The building carries patches, scars, reused beams, raised floors, lowered doorways, and layers of turf from many seasons. Its strength does not come from remaining unchanged. It comes from changing without being abandoned. You walk beyond the settlement as evening settles across the grass, and the turf houses begin disappearing into the landscape. Their walls merge with the slopes. Their roofs catch the same pale light as the surrounding fields. Smoke rises from openings in thin grey threads. showing where human warmth remains hidden beneath the earth. From a distance, the buildings look temporary. They are not. A structure made from soil, roots, stone, and carefully rationed timber may serve a household for generations. Individual walls require rebuilding, roofs need fresh layers, and wooden supports eventually weaken. Yet the basic method survives because it answers several northern problems at once. The climate demands shelter from wind. The land offers abundant turf. Forests may be distant, limited, or rapidly reduced. Fuel must be conserved. Families need spaces that can expand, shrink, and change with their fortunes. Turf construction responds to every one of these pressures without requiring a supply chain, factory, or helpful wagon arriving with identical wooden boards. The building grows from materials found close to home. This local abundance is one reason the tradition endures. A household does not need to wait for imported stone or expensive timber before repairing a damaged wall. Strong sod can be cut from suitable ground. Loose stones can be gathered. Reusable beams can be taken from an older structure. The cost is paid mainly through labour. That does not make the house cheap. Human effort is precious, especially during short summers when farming, fishing, preserving food, and preparing fuel already consume every useful hour. Yet labour can be shared among relatives and neighbours in ways imported materials cannot. You watch people gather near a partly rebuilt dwelling. Some cut turf, others carry blocks. A carpenter examines reused beams. Children collect smaller stones and manage to turn the work into a competition that has no clear rules. The house rises through cooperation. No single craftsperson controls the entire process. Knowledge is distributed across the community. One person understands drainage, another selects good turf, another recognizes a strong joint. Older builders remember which wall failed during a severe storm and why. Experience moves through conversation and imitation. A mainstream historical fact is that turf building remains common in Iceland long beyond the Viking Age, continuing in various forms into the 19th and even early 20th centuries. The houses change over time, becoming more specialized and sometimes more elaborate. But the central reliance on thick turf walls and roofs persists for many centuries. This longevity is not proof that every turf dwelling is comfortable. Many are cramped. Many are damp. Some are poorly ventilated. Some require exhausting repair. A design can endure because it is practical, not because anyone would feature it in a luxury property advertisement. You imagine the listing: charming green roof, naturally insulated walls, excellent proximity to livestock, occasional indoor rainfall, mouse community included. The deeper strength of turf architecture lies in flexibility. A wealthy household can build a large complex with connected rooms, storage chambers, workshops, and impressive timber interiors. A poorer family can create a smaller shelter using the same principles. Rooms can be added as the household grows. A damaged section can be abandoned while the rest remains occupied. An old wall can support a new structure. Buildings can cluster around shared passages, reducing exposure to bad weather. The form adapts without losing its basic logic. You move through a later turf complex where narrow corridors connect several rooms. Instead of one broad hall, daily activities occur in separate spaces. A kitchen contains smoke and cooking heat. Sleeping rooms preserve warmth. Storage areas remain cooler. The building has become a small village under one grassy skin. Each room has its own conditions, yet the surrounding turf links them into a protected whole. Cold air must pass through passages and doors before reaching the deepest living areas. The arrangement resembles a burrow designed by people who have developed strong opinions about cupboards. Some houses include decorated wooden fronts facing outward, while turf surrounds the sides and rear. The timber facade displays status and craftsmanship. Behind it, thick earth continues performing the less glamorous work of insulation. Visitors see carved wood. Winter meets the turf. This combination reveals that practical construction and social display do not oppose one another. People want warmth, but they also want beauty, dignity, and evidence that the household is doing well. A doorway can be carved, a room can hold fine textiles, a bench can display imported objects. The outer shell remains rooted in grass because pride does not stop the wind. Historians still argue whether the long survival of turf architecture reflects exceptional environmental adaptation, economic necessity, cultural conservatism, social inequality, or some changing combination of these forces. A wealthy farmer and a struggling labourer may both live within turf walls, but their experiences differ greatly. One household possesses dry rooms, strong beams, ample bedding, and enough servants to maintain everything. Another endures leaks, crowding, weak fuel supplies, and endless repairs. The material alone does not determine comfort. Good construction requires skill. Good maintenance requires time. Reliable heating requires fuel. Healthy food requires productive land. A thick wall cannot solve poverty, illness, or a failed harvest. It can only preserve the warmth available inside. That limitation helps explain why the natural furnace is both impressive and ordinary. The house never produces abundance. It stretches scarce resources. A small fire lasts longer because heat escapes slowly. Limited timber supports a building mostly made from earth. Several rooms share protected walls. Leafstock warmth assists human warmth. Repairable materials delay total replacement. Everything is extended, reused, and persuaded to serve again. You stand near a wall where grass flowers tremble above old soil. The structure has been rebuilt so many times that nobody remembers where the earliest layer begins. This continuity gives turf houses a peculiar relationship with time. A timber building may be imagined as one object erected on a particular date. A turf house behaves more like a maintained landscape. Parts are always old, parts are always new. The doorway may be recent, the foundation ancient, the roof renewed last summer, and one beam inherited from a building that stood elsewhere. The house survives through replacement rather than permanence. You might compare it to an old broom that has received 3 new handles and 5 new brushes, except the broom is full of sleeping relatives and weighs more than a ship. The people inside still consider it the same home. Memory attaches to location, layout, and family use rather than to every original piece. A child grows up beside one hearth, leaves, and returns years later to find a rebuilt roof and raised floor. The house feels familiar because its patterns continue. The bench occupies the same side. The entrance bends in the same direction. The wind sounds the same against the walls. The smell of turf after rain remains unchanged. Architecture holds memory through repeated sensations. A quirky tidbit survives in stories of turf buildings that appear almost invisible until a traveller comes close enough to notice smoke or a doorway. In poor weather, a settlement can blend so completely into the hills that the land seems inhabited by chimneys. You picture a stranger crossing the valley, seeing smoke rise from grass, and wondering whether the earth itself has begun cooking supper. The hidden quality is useful. Low profiles reduce exposure. Turf colours match the surroundings. Snow covers walls and roofs alike. Yet invisibility can also become dangerous. A traveller may walk onto a roof without realising it. Livestock may wander across occupied rooms. Someone unfamiliar with the settlement could discover a household beneath their boots. This is perhaps the only architectural style where knocking may involve stamping accidentally on the ceiling. The endurance of turf building also reveals the cost of environmental change. Early settlers bring familiar wooden construction traditions, but available forests can decline through cutting, grazing, erosion, and climate pressures. Turf becomes increasingly essential where timber cannot easily regenerate. The house therefore records adaptation to scarcity. It also contributes to that scarcity indirectly. Turf cutting removes vegetation and can expose soil to erosion when poorly managed. Grazing limits regrowth. Fuel collection pressures the land further. The method is well suited to its environment, but it is not automatically harmless. Every settlement must negotiate with the ground. Cut too much sod, and pastures weaken. Remove too many trees, and future beams vanish. Graze too heavily, and roots no longer bind the soil. Survival depends on taking enough without destroying the source. You look across the fields and see faint scars where turf has been harvested. Some areas recover beneath new grass. Others remain thin and exposed. The same landscape that shelters people also shows the marks of sheltering them over centuries. New materials and technologies change domestic life. Imported timber becomes more available in some periods. Stone construction expands. Iron stoves and chimneys improve heating and reduce indoor smoke. Glass windows bring more light. Turf houses gradually lose their practical advantage. A stove concentrates heat more efficiently than an open hearth. A chimney draws smoke away. Wooden floors remain drier. Modern walls require less yearly rebuilding. People do not abandon turf because they suddenly forget its usefulness. They move toward alternatives that demand less maintenance and offer cleaner or brighter interiors. Even then, transition is slow. A family may add a timber room to a turf complex. A new stove may heat an old earthen chamber. Modern furniture may stand beneath a grassy roof. Historical change enters through the doorway one object at a time. Eventually, many turf houses become ruins. Roofs collapse inward. Walls soften into mounds. Timber is removed for reuse. Grass covers the outlines. Others survive as preserved buildings, museums, churches, farm structures, or reconstructed sites. Their quiet shapes attract visitors who come expecting something primitive and leave recognizing something more thoughtful. The engineering is not hidden in complicated machinery. It is hidden in proportions, thickness, low height, layered materials, controlled openings, shared heat, careful maintenance. The natural furnace succeeds because it does not depend upon one brilliant feature. It combines many modest advantages until they become powerful together. You enter the house one final time as evening deepens. The fire glows low. Warmth gathers around the benches. Damp air remains outside the narrow passage. You understand the building differently now. The turf is not merely wall material. It is stored summer growth protecting winter life. The timber frame is not merely support. It is a scarce resource shaped into the strongest possible form. The crowded interior is not merely inconvenience. It is shared energy. The constant repairs are not proof of failure. They are the method by which the house continues. Around you, people settle into familiar places. A blanket unfolds. A bowl is passed. A child leans against a post worn smooth by hands. The house does not defeat the northern world. It joins it. Grass grows on the roof. Stone anchors the walls. Wind flows over the low ridge. Human warmth remains gathered within. For centuries, this simple agreement between people and landscape keeps the cold waiting outside. The voices around you begin to soften, and the room seems to grow wider as the shadows blur at its edges. The fire settles beneath pale ash, holding a quiet red glow that no longer asks for attention. You rest against the wooden bench and feel the steady weight of earth beyond the wall. It does not press upon you now. It surrounds you gently, like a hillside folding around a hidden pocket of warmth. Outside, the grass bends beneath the night wind. Rain touches the roof in soft, scattered taps. Each drop sinks into roots and soil, losing its sharpness before it reaches the room below. The animals breathe slowly behind their partition. A dog shifts near someone's feet. A final lamp flickers, then steadies. Nothing here needs to hurry. The walls have endured storms, winters, footsteps, repairs, laughter, smoke, and long hours of ordinary work. They hold no perfect silence, only a calm collection of small sounds. A beam gives one gentle creak. Straw rustles beneath a sleeper. The embers whisper and grow dim. You allow your shoulders to loosen. The cold remains beyond the doorway, but it feels distant now, softened by thick turf, folded wool, and the warm breathing of the household. The grassy roof becomes part of the dark hillside. The doorway fades into shadow. Smoke rises once more, thin and silver, then disappears into the sky. You're safe inside this low green shelter. The wind passes overhead. The earth keeps the warmth close. Your breathing slows with the breathing around you. Easy and untroubled. The fire becomes a small red star, then only a glow, then a memory beneath the ash. And as the quiet house settles gently into the sleeping landscape, you may let every thought grow still.